A looming nuclear arms race right in the heart of the Asia-Pacific, sweeping U.S. Treasury sanctions squeezing the Strait of Hormuz, and a literal trial by fire for the Indian Air Force in Kazuli.
Welcome to Zenith Global News. I'm your host, and we are breaking down the critical global developments you absolutely need to know. We're moving fast and getting straight to the facts, so let's get into it.
First up, the UK's shifting voter demographics. We're seeing a massive, rapid realignment at the local level right now. Traditional political bases are completely fracturing. For instance, the Labour Party is losing historically loyal Pakistani and Bangladeshi voters to the Green Party and to independents. Meanwhile, Indian voters are actually showing increased support for Reform UK and the Conservatives. Now, you might be wondering, why is this happening? Well, these aren't just random shifts. Muslim voters are heavily mobilizing around specific foreign policies regarding Gaza and Kashmir. On the flip side, Indian voters are pivoting based on strict domestic immigration and asylum policies. So the real expert takeaway here is the rise of what we call the vote bloc impact. In areas like Tower Hamlets and Oldham, these highly organized, issue-driven demographic groups have literally become the new political kingmakers, effectively ending decades of major party dominance. It really makes you ask, can localized demographic shifts fundamentally redefine an entire nation's foreign policy? It's a huge question, but speaking of foreign policy, let's pivot from European politics over to shifting defense strategies in the Middle East. Section 2, the U.S.-Saudi SKYWASP drone partnership. Defense manufacturing is adapting fast. A new joint venture called SR2 Vector has just been formed between Saudi startup SR2 Defense Systems and U.S. firm Vector Defense. They're teaming up to manufacture these SKYWASP drones right near Riyadh. We're talking about a one-way strike drone with a 1,500-kilometer range, directly inspired by Iran's notorious Shahed drones. Now, why does this matter? Well, it all comes down to a very specific number: $35,000. That is roughly the cost of an Iranian Shahed drone. Gulf nations have realized they simply cannot use multi-million-dollar missile systems to shoot down $35,000 targets. They desperately need cheap, high-volume alternatives. And the expert takeaway here comes straight from Lucien Ziegler, the co-founder of SR2. He states, SKYWASP is a program that can level the playing field and boost Saudi Arabia's deterrence capabilities. Essentially, this is all about localized manufacturing, creating cost-effective, high-volume, strategic deterrence. So, will localized, low-cost drone production actually stabilize the region, or will it just further escalate tensions? That tension brings us right to our next story, focusing on one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. Next up, sanctions on Iran's Strait Authority. Here's the headline. Following recent military strikes, the U.S. Treasury has officially slapped sanctions on the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. This is an entity created by Tehran specifically to manage and restrict passage through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. is directly accusing them of supporting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And why is this a massive deal? Roughly one-fifth of the entire global oil supply flows through this single, incredibly narrow, and vulnerable conduit. Any disruption or Iranian control here could send the global economy into an absolute tailspin. The expert takeaway is clear. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent pointed out that the Iranian military's latest attempt to extort global maritime trade is proof that economic fury has left the regime desperate for cash. The U.S. is using targeted economic countermeasures here to secure global trade routes without firing a single shot. So while economic and diplomatic fires continue to burn in the Gulf, we pivot our news desk to literal fires raging in the hills of northern India. The IAF battles the Kasali forest fire. Here's how this unprecedented environmental rescue operation played out. At 3 p.m., a fierce blaze erupted in the Kasali Hills. For 15 hours, the fire spread rapidly across the Gilbert Trail. By 5 p.m. the next day, civil authorities had to call in the big guns, and the Indian Air Force stepped in to execute relentless helicopter water drops. To put the scale of this rapid response into perspective, just look at the numbers. The IAF executed over 15 shuttles, dropping a staggering 40,000 liters of water to stop the blaze. They were hitting steep terrain where ground crews literally couldn't reach, saving highly vulnerable forest zones. Our tactical takeaway here revolves around a piece of equipment called a Bambi bucket. It's a specialized collapsible container suspended beneath a helicopter. The INF used this to scoop water directly from sources like Sukna Lake for pinpoint precision drops on active fires. It proves just how vital specialized military hardware has become for extreme climate disasters.
Looking at U.S.-China conflict and Taiwan nuclear risk.
So, a brand new strategic assessment just dropped from the London-based ISS ahead of the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, and honestly, it paints a pretty sobering picture. They're warning that we're essentially looking at a new nuclear arms race, with the Asia-Pacific right at its core. If a conflict over Taiwan were to break out between the U.S. and China, the ISS says it would likely trigger massive, sweeping military operations aimed straight at rival command hubs.
The report actually hammers home a trio of specific dangers here. We're talking about rapidly expanding nuclear arsenals, a heavy push for long-range conventional strikes, and, maybe the scariest part, a complete lack of strategic guardrails. Seriously, there are zero agreed-upon rules of engagement to protect critical communication nodes right now.
Okay, let's put this into perspective. Why does this matter? Well, if you look at active nuclear warheads, Russia and the US currently dwarf Beijing's stockpile. They're sitting at 4,400 and 3,700 respectively. But China, they have 620 right now, but they are expanding that atomic capability faster than literally any other global power. To really grasp the numeric scale of this arms race, a recent Pentagon projection estimates China is on track to hit 1,000 active warheads by 2030. That is a massive, incredibly rapid acceleration for just the end of this decade.
Assessing these severe geopolitical stakes, the ISS document lays it out pretty flatly, saying the prospect of nuclear escalation will thus continue to loom large in a major US-China conflict. The stakes here, yeah, they couldn't be higher.
From those rising nuclear risks out in the Pacific, let's shift our focus westward. How exactly is global maritime trade, and by extension, the world's energy supply, being choked off in the Middle East right now? Next up, U.S. sanctions on Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Let's do a quick timeline to trace exactly how we got here, because things have escalated incredibly fast. Since the February 28th outbreak of conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran, we saw the vital Strait of Hormuz essentially shut down. The U.S. then carried out strikes on Iranian sites, which brings us directly to these aggressive new financial sanctions issued by the U.S. Treasury. The main target of these sanctions is this newly established Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Tehran actually set this body to manage requests for passage through the strait. And they didn't stop there. They even published maps reaffirming Tehran's claims over the waters on both sides of this crucial choke point. Now, here is why you should care about this. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a random waterway. It is the central conduit for a massive 20% of the entire global oil supply. Think about that. 1/5 of the world's oil. A continued closure here threatens to send the global economy into absolute turmoil. Because of that risk, the U.S. Treasury has issued a very stark warning. They're stating that anyone cooperating with this new authority could be viewed as providing sanctionable support to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So, effectively, it's a direct financial blockade. Laying out the rationale for this blockade, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated, "The Iranian military's latest attempt to extort global maritime trade is proof that economic fury has left the regime desperate for cash."
Okay, turning away from international economic and military standoffs for a moment, how are authorities battling a literal fiery crisis from the skies above India?
Our final story. The IAF combats the Kasoli forest fire.
This is a high-stakes, dynamic rescue operation by the Indian Air Force in Himachal Pradesh's Solan district. Around 3 p.m. on Tuesday, a severe fire erupted across the steep, really hard-to-reach terrain of the Upper Mall area in Kasoli. After the blaze raged for over 15 hours straight along the Gilbert Trail, the IAF had to step in, deploying helicopters equipped with specialized Bambi buckets.
The operational mechanics of this are just incredible to watch. These helicopters were swooping down to scoop water directly from nearby Sukna Lake. They flew over 15 precision shuttles, targeting active fire lines where traditional road access was totally impossible. And the best news? Remarkably, 0 casualties have been reported.
To give you an idea of the scale here and why this aerial intervention was absolutely crucial, an astounding 40,000 liters of water were dropped precisely where it was needed.
That massive volume is what successfully slowed the fire down, preventing it from sweeping deeper into highly vulnerable forest zones.
Summarizing this massive ongoing mission, an official IAF statement reads, "The Indian Air Force is relentlessly engaged in firefighting operations in Kasoli, Himachal Pradesh, assisting civil authorities." It really is a true testament to rapid, effective emergency response under pressure.
And that wraps up our rapid-fire explainer of today's top global and domestic developments. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to keep getting these updates.
Because in a world moving this fast, you need the facts delivered clearly and directly. Stay informed, stay aware, stay ahead, only on Zenith Global News.